Tonight's story explodes out of nowhere, and fans are shocked by just how fast things spiral. The political media world is rocked when Candace ACCUSES drops a bombshell accusation aimed straight at longtime ally-turned-rival Dave Rubin, and what she claims is described by insiders as absolutely disgusting. It starts with a single late-night post. No warning, no context, just a cryptic message that sends fans scrambling, screenshots flying, and group chats melting down. Within minutes, speculation runs wild. What could Candace possibly be hinting at? Why now? And why does Dave suddenly go silent when the pressure hits? Emotions ran high as supporters on both sides picked teams, dissecting old interviews, awkward smiles, and moments everyone once ignored. But that's only the first crack in the dam. Because as the accusations echo across social media, a second scandal erupts, this time pulling Shapiro into the chaos. Whispers turn into headlines as rival creators allege that something isn't adding up with his numbers. Buying views? Manipulating metrics? Fans are stunned, critics feel vindicated, and friends are suddenly nowhere to be found. Behind closed doors, tensions boil over. Text messages are leaked, at least allegedly. Phone calls end in shouting matches. One source claims, this wasn't supposed to go public, but now it's war. The family was left divided, friendships hang by a thread, and no one knows who will speak next. So buckle up, because if even half of this drama is true, nothing in this media universe will ever look the same again. The night it all supposedly began, nobody expected the silence to be louder than the noise. Candace sat alone, staring at her phone, the glow reflecting back a face that looked calm but was anything but. Insiders would later claim she had been holding on to something for weeks, something that made her question every conversation, every smile, every "we're on the same side" promise she had ever heard. When she finally spoke, it wasn't in an interview or a polished statement. It was a raw moment, whispered first to a small circle, then echoed louder than anyone could control. Fans are shocked not because drama exists, but because this drama came from people who once called each other family. According to events that spread like wildfire, Candace accused Dave of behavior she described as absolutely disgusting. She didn't explain it all at once. Instead, she let fragments slip out, vague but emotionally charged, the kind of words that light a match without showing the fire. "You don't know who someone really is until they think you'll never speak," she allegedly said during a tense phone call that a source claims they overheard. Dave's response, or lack of one, only fueled the speculation. He reportedly paused, sighed, and said, "This is not how I wanted this to go," before the line went dead. Within hours, fans began replaying old clips, slowing down videos, reading between the lines of past conversations. Moments that once felt friendly now seemed cold. Jokes felt like warnings. Candace's supporters claimed the signs were always there, that she had been protecting others at her own expense. Dave's fans fired back, accusing her of betrayal and exaggeration. Emotions ran high as comment sections turned into battlegrounds, and the family was left divided not by blood but by ideology and loyalty. Behind the scenes, the tension allegedly spilled into private spaces. One dramatized account claims Candace confronted Dave in person days earlier, in a quiet room where voices were low but sharp. "Don't lie to me," she supposedly said, her hands shaking. "I know what you did, and I know who you hurt." Dave, according to this version, leaned back and whispered, "You're going to destroy everything we built." The air was thick with years of shared history, now weaponized against each other. As this narrative unfolded, a second wave of chaos was quietly forming. While everyone focused on the accusation, rumors began circulating about Ben. It started as a joke on a livestream, then turned into a question, then into an allegation that wouldn't go away. Was he buying views? Manipulating numbers? Playing a game nobody else wanted to admit existed? Fans are shocked again, not just by the claim, but by how quickly it felt believable to some. "I always wondered how it jumped that fast," one fan commented, while another wrote, "This feels like a setup." The story claims Candace didn't intend to drag Ben into it, but once the floodgates opened, nothing stayed contained. Messages allegedly surfaced showing heated exchanges between people close to all three. One text, described by an unnamed source, read, "If this comes out, it's over for all of us." Another simply said, "We should have never trusted each other." These words, real or not, became symbols of a collapsing alliance. Candace, in this dramatized telling, struggled with the backlash. Friends urged her to clarify, to soften her tone, to protect her image. But she refused. "I'm done being quiet," she reportedly said through tears. "They can call me dramatic, they can call me bitter, but I'm not lying." That statement alone sent fans into a frenzy, interpreting it as confirmation that something darker was lurking beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Dave was said to be scrambling to control the narrative. Advisors urged him to respond, to deny everything strongly, but hesitation followed him. Every delayed response made the story grow. Every silence became suspicious. Why won't he just say it's not true? Fans asked. Others argued that silence meant legal advice, not guilt. The divide deepened, and longtime supporters found themselves questioning people they once defended without hesitation. As for Ben, the alleged buying views rumor took on a life of its own. Parody videos popped up, charts were shared, and amateur analysts claimed they had cracked the code. Ben, portrayed in this drama, laughed it off at first, calling it ridiculous. But laughter turned to irritation when the jokes didn't stop. "This is what they do when they can't beat you," he supposedly told a friend. "They make you the villain." By the end of this first stretch of the saga, nothing felt stable anymore. Alliances were cracked, trust was broken, and fans were left refreshing their feeds, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Candace stood firm, Dave stayed quiet, Ben grew defensive, and everyone watching could feel it. This was only the beginning, and whatever came next would make the first accusation look like a warning shot rather than the main event. The fallout didn't slow down, it multiplied. By the next morning, Candace woke up to hundreds of missed notifications, her phone vibrating like it was alive. Every refresh brought a new theory, a new accusation, a new side chosen. Fans are shocked by how fast loyalty turned into suspicion. People who once defended Dave without question were now asking uncomfortable questions, while others accused Candace of manufacturing chaos for attention. She read it all in silence, jaw tight, eyes burning, knowing that once a story like this escapes, it doesn't belong to anyone anymore. According to the dramatized narrative spreading everywhere, Candace finally agreed to speak privately with a small group of allies. Her voice was steady but heavy. "You think this is easy for me?" she allegedly said. "I kept this buried because I didn't want to hurt anyone. But protecting them almost destroyed me." Those words alone became fuel. Fans clipped them, replayed them, slowed them down, searching for hidden meanings. Emotions ran high as supporters claimed this proved she had been suffering quietly for years. Dave, meanwhile, was portrayed as increasingly isolated. Friends stopped calling, invitations dried up, even neutral voices began to distance themselves, afraid of being pulled into the storm. One dramatized scene describes Dave pacing his living room late at night, rehearsing statements he never released. "If I deny it, they say I'm lying. If I explain, they twist it," he supposedly muttered. The pressure wasn't just public, it was personal. People he trusted were suddenly watching him differently. Then came the first alleged leak. Not proof, not evidence, just a message that someone claimed showed tension long before the accusation. It was mundane on the surface, but fans read it like scripture. "Why would he say that?" they asked. "Why does this sound like guilt?" The internet did what it always does, turning fragments into conclusions. Dave's defenders argued it was nothing. Critics said it was everything. As this chaos unfolded, Ben's situation escalated from rumor to obsession. Creators dissected analytics on screen, pointing at spikes and dips like they were solving a crime. "This doesn't happen naturally," one voice insisted. Another countered, "This is what success looks like." Ben, in this retelling, grew visibly frustrated. He addressed it indirectly, joking at first, then snapping when the laughter didn't land. "You people want a scandal so badly you'll invent one," he allegedly said off camera, his tone sharp. What made everything worse was the growing belief that these stories were connected. Fans speculated about secret meetings, coordinated silence, shared strategies. Some claimed Candace knew about Ben's alleged behavior and that it was part of why she finally spoke. Others argued the opposite, that dragging Ben in was retaliation, not truth. The family was left divided not just into camps, but into narratives that couldn't coexist. Behind the scenes, friendships allegedly collapsed in real time. One dramatized account describes a group chat exploding at 2 a.m., messages flying so fast no one could keep up. Accusations, defensiveness, regret, all colliding. "This was never supposed to be public," one message read. "You forced this," another replied. By sunrise, the chat was silent, and several people had left it entirely. Candace, painted in this story as both resolute and exhausted, struggled with doubt. Late one night, she reportedly questioned whether speaking out had been worth it. "Maybe I should have stayed quiet," she whispered to a confidant. The response came quickly. "And live with it forever?" That moment hardened her resolve. Silence, she decided, was no longer an option, no matter the cost. Dave finally attempted to regain control, at least in this version. He reached out to intermediaries, hoping to calm things down without a public spectacle. But every attempt was leaked, twisted, or rejected. He's panicking, critics said. He's trying to clean it up, others argued. Nothing landed the way he hoped. Every move felt late, every word felt insufficient. Ben's inner circle reportedly urged him to ignore the noise, but ignoring it didn't make it go away. Sponsors asked questions. Collaborators hesitated. Even casual mentions of his name sparked debates. It's not about views, one dramatized friend told him. It's about perception. Ben, portrayed as stubborn, hated that answer. Perception shouldn't matter if it's not true, he shot back, slamming his hand on the table. Fans, watching all of this unfold, felt like they were witnessing the collapse of something bigger than a feud. Comment sections filled with nostalgia for the old days when everyone seemed united. Others celebrated the implosion, saying it proved their long-held suspicions. Emotions ran high as people projected their own disappointments onto the drama, turning it into something deeply personal. As the days dragged on, Candace released another cryptic statement, carefully worded but emotionally loaded. She didn't name names, didn't give details, but her message was clear: she wasn't backing down. "Truth doesn't expire," she wrote. That line echoed everywhere. Supporters hailed it as bravery. Critics mocked it as theatrics. Either way, it reignited the fire just as it seemed to cool. Dave, in response, allegedly confided to a close friend that he felt betrayed beyond repair. "We survived worse than this together," he said, "and now I'm the villain." Whether that sentiment was real or imagined didn't matter. It fit the narrative perfectly, and fans ran with it, painting him as either a misunderstood casualty or a master manipulator finally exposed. By this point, Ben's alleged scandal had fully merged with the larger story. People spoke about all three names in the same breath, as if they were chapters of one saga instead of separate controversies. Conspiracy theories flourished. Timelines were drawn. Coincidences were treated like clues. The story was no longer about what happened, but about what people believed happened. As tension reached a boiling point, everyone involved seemed to brace for impact. Candace prepared for backlash. Dave prepared for fallout. Ben prepared for scrutiny that wouldn't fade overnight. Fans refreshed their feeds obsessively, waiting for the moment when someone would finally say too much or reveal something irreversible. And just when it felt like the storm had peaked, a new whisper began circulating, quieter than the rest but far more unsettling. Someone close to the situation, according to this tale, was thinking about speaking out. Not to defend, not to accuse, but to expose what really went on behind closed doors. And if that voice broke the silence, everything that came before would look like nothing more than the calm before an even bigger explosion. The whisper didn't stay quiet for long. By the time most people heard it, it had already grown teeth. Someone from the inner circle, someone who had been present during the earliest days of trust and strategy, was allegedly preparing to talk. Not in vague hints or cryptic posts, but in full sentences. The idea alone sent shockwaves through everyone involved. Fans are shocked at how quickly the conversation shifted from speculation to anticipation. Who would crack first became the only question that mattered. Candace felt it immediately. In this dramatized telling, she sensed the shift before anyone told her. "They're getting ready to change the story," she allegedly said, pacing back and forth. Part of her welcomed it. Another part feared it. Truth, after all, has a way of hurting everyone in the room, not just the guilty. Still, she refused to retreat. "If they're going to talk, let them talk," she said, voice firm but tired. "I'm done carrying this alone." Dave, on the other hand, reportedly spiraled. Every new rumor felt like another door slamming shut. He began to distrust everyone around him, replaying conversations in his head, wondering who had recorded what, who had screenshots saved, who had loyalties that shifted with public opinion. "This isn't about the truth anymore," he allegedly snapped at a confidant. "It's about who survives." That line alone, once leaked, became a rallying cry for critics who said it proved everything they suspected. Ben watched the situation with growing frustration. In this version, he felt unfairly dragged into a war that wasn't his. Yet the more he tried to separate himself, the more entangled he became. Every denial was treated like deflection. Every joke was dissected for insecurity. "I didn't ask for this," he reportedly said during a tense meeting. "But now I'm paying for it." Emotions ran high as even his most loyal supporters began asking questions they never thought they'd ask. Then came the supposed almost interview. Word spread that the insider had agreed to speak with an independent creator known for burning bridges. The internet exploded. People speculated about motives. Was this revenge? Guilt? Desperation? Why now? Fans asked. Why not earlier? Theories multiplied, each more dramatic than the last. Some claimed money was involved. Others said it was about clearing a conscience. No one knew, and that uncertainty made it worse. Candace was said to receive a warning late one night. A simple message, no greeting, no signature. It's bigger than you think. She stared at it for a long time. Bigger than she thought meant more people, more damage, more collateral. For the first time since speaking out, she hesitated. Not because she doubted herself, but because she understood the blast radius was expanding. Dave's camp, sensing danger, allegedly attempted damage control. Legal language replaced emotional appeals. Silence replaced half statements. But silence, by now, felt louder than any denial. Fans read into every pause, every cancelled appearance, every avoided question. If there was nothing to hide, he'd say so, critics insisted. Defenders countered that the internet had already decided his guilt. The family was left divided beyond repair. When the insider finally spoke, at least in this dramatized account, it wasn't explosive in the way people expected. There was no single shocking confession. Instead, there was context. Messy, uncomfortable context. Stories of pressure, of compromises made quietly, of lines blurred over time. No one thought it would end like this, the insider allegedly said. We told ourselves it was temporary. Necessary. Those words ignited a new wave of outrage. Temporary and necessary to do what? No one could agree. Candace listened to the playback in silence. Some of it validated her feelings. Some of it complicated them. This is exactly what I meant, she reportedly said at one point, pausing the audio. This is the rot nobody wanted to see. Her supporters felt vindicated. Her critics argued it proved she had known more than she admitted. Either way, the story twisted again, refusing to settle. Dave's reaction, as portrayed in this saga, was quiet devastation. Not anger, not denial, but something closer to resignation. They were there, he said softly, according to one account. They know what we were dealing with. To him, context was explanation. To the public, it sounded like excuse. The gap between intention and perception had never felt wider. Ben, hearing his name mentioned even in passing, reportedly lost patience. He addressed it directly, not with humor, but with sharp clarity. Stop using me as a placeholder for your disappointment, he said. But even that line was twisted. Some praised his bluntness. Others claimed it showed arrogance. There was no winning move left, only damage control. Fans, meanwhile, turned the drama into a referendum on trust itself. Old clips resurfaced again, now reinterpreted with new knowledge. Moments once praised were now mocked. Friendships that seemed genuine were reframed as transactional. Emotions ran high as people mourned the idea of authenticity more than any individual figure. As weeks passed, the initial shock faded, replaced by exhaustion. Candace felt it deeply. I didn't want to become this, she admitted in a private conversation that later leaked. But I couldn't stay silent either. That vulnerability softened some critics and hardened others. For every person who empathized, another accused her of playing the victim. Dave retreated further, limiting appearances, speaking only through carefully crafted statements. Some saw it as dignity, others as avoidance. His absence became its own narrative, filled with assumptions and projections. He's hiding, critics said. He's protecting himself, supporters replied. Neither side could prove their case, but that didn't stop them from arguing. Ben's alleged view controversy slowly lost its shock value, but not its sting. Even as attention drifted, the label stuck. Jokes lingered, doubts lingered longer. This is how it works, a dramatized ally told him. Even when it's over, it's not. That realization hit hard. Reputation, once cracked, never fully returns to its original shape. By the time the dust seemed ready to settle, everyone involved had changed. Candace was more guarded. Dave was more distant. Ben was more combative. Fans, once united by shared admiration, were now fractured by suspicion. The family was left divided in a way that felt permanent, not dramatic, but quietly sad. Yet even then, the story refused to die. New angles emerged. Old quotes resurfaced again. People asked whether this was really about accusations and views, or about power, ego, and the cost of building an empire in public. No one had a definitive answer, but everyone had an opinion. And as the narrative crept toward what felt like an ending, one thing became painfully clear to everyone watching. This was never just about one accusation or one rumor. It was about what happens when trust erodes slowly, then collapses all at once. And with one final rumor beginning to circulate, hinting at another conversation, another leak, another reckoning, the audience could feel it deep down. This story still wasn't finished. By the time the latest rumor surfaced, people weren't even shocked anymore, they were braced. It spread quietly at first, tucked inside comments and private messages, then grew louder as more creators hinted they had heard the same thing. According to the version of events, there had been another conversation, one never meant to leave the room. A conversation where truths were spoken not for an audience, but out of exhaustion. Fans are shocked not by the content, but by how human it all suddenly feels. Candace reportedly heard about it from someone she no longer trusted. That alone stung more than the rumor itself. "So that's how I find out now," she allegedly said, her voice flat. Anger didn't rush in the way it once did. Instead, there was disappointment, heavier and harder to shake. She had crossed a line she could never uncross, and now everyone else was deciding how much further they were willing to go. In this dramatized account, the conversation in question painted no heroes. It spoke of ambition dressed up as purpose, of compromises justified by bigger goals. "We told ourselves it was for the movement," one voice allegedly said. "But somewhere along the way, it became about us." That sentence alone, once paraphrased online, detonated a new wave of commentary. People latched onto it like proof of long-suspected hypocrisy. Dave's reaction to this alleged leak was described as breaking, not explosive but quiet. "I gave everything to this," he supposedly said, staring at nothing. "And now it's being rewritten without me." Those closest to him worried less about his reputation and more about his isolation. Bridges weren't just burned, they were gone. And rebuilding felt impossible when every word could be weaponized. Ben, still trying to escape the gravitational pull of the scandal, found himself pulled back in again. The conversation mentioned systems, numbers, pressure to perform. Nothing directly accusatory, nothing definitive. But implication was enough. Implication always is. "They don't need proof," he allegedly muttered. "They just need a story." Emotions ran high as his supporters begged him to disengage, while critics demanded answers he felt he didn't owe. Candace, meanwhile, wrestled with a new fear. Not that she was wrong, but that she had become the symbol for something bigger than her own experience. "I didn't sign up to be the face of everyone's disillusionment," she reportedly said. Yet that's exactly what she had become. Every frustrated fan, every former supporter, projected their disappointment onto her words. The internet shifted tone again, from outrage to autopsy. People weren't yelling as much. They were analyzing. Timelines grew more detailed. Motives were debated endlessly. Was this betrayal or inevitability? Was anyone truly innocent, or just quieter? The family was left divided along lines that no apology could erase. In private, Candace allegedly received messages that chilled her more than the hate ever did. "I believe you, but I wish you hadn't said it." Those words haunted her. Belief without support felt hollow. She began to understand that truth doesn't always liberate, sometimes it just relocates the burden. Dave attempted one last move, at least in this telling. Not a defense, not an apology, but a reframing. He spoke about context, about pressure, about mistakes made in an environment that rewarded certainty and punished doubt. Some found it refreshingly honest. Others dismissed it as too little, too late. The response was split, but calmer. Outrage had burned itself out, leaving behind something colder. Ben finally addressed the View controversy head-on, laying out his version with sharp precision. No jokes, no sarcasm. Just numbers, explanations, frustration barely contained. For a moment, it seemed to work. Even some critics paused, but the pause didn't last. Skepticism returned, quieter but persistent. Reputation damage doesn't shout, it whispers. Fans watching all of this began to turn inward. Comment sections filled with confessions. "I defended people I didn't know," one wrote. "I attacked others without proof," admitted another. The drama had evolved into a collective reckoning, not just with public figures, but with parasocial loyalty itself. Emotions ran high, but they were softer now, tinged with regret. Candace noticed the shift. The attacks felt less vicious, more tired. She felt the same way. "I don't want to fight anymore," she reportedly said. "I just don't want to pretend." That sentiment resonated more than any accusation ever had. It didn't erase the damage, but it changed the temperature. Dave, increasingly withdrawn, found unexpected support from unlikely places. People who had once criticized him publicly now spoke about complexity, about gray areas. It didn't redeem him in everyone's eyes, but it humanized him again. And in a story that had flattened everyone into villains or victims, humanity felt radical. Ben stepped back, reducing appearances, choosing silence deliberately this time. Not the kind that invites speculation, but the kind that signals boundaries. Some respected it, others called it avoidance. But the noise around his name slowly dulled, replaced by newer controversies, newer targets. As weeks turned into months in this saga, the story lost its urgency but not its lessons. Candace was no longer just an accuser. Dave was no longer just accused. Ben was no longer just rumored. They were all symbols of a system that chews people up, then argues about who deserved it most. The final twist wasn't a leak or a confession. It was boredom. The audience moved on, not because everything was resolved, but because outrage has a short attention span. Those left behind had to live with what remained after the cameras turned away. Candace rebuilt slowly, carefully, choosing her words with a precision born from scars. Dave learned to exist without constant validation, a quieter life forced upon him by circumstance. Ben recalibrated, sharper edges still intact, but more guarded. Fans, once united by admiration, were left with questions they couldn't outsource anymore. Who do you trust when everyone is human? What does accountability look like without spectacle? The family was left divided, but wiser, even if it didn't feel like it. And somewhere beneath all the accusations, exaggerated rumors, and dramatized betrayals, one uncomfortable truth lingered. This wasn't a story about who was right or wrong. It was about what happens when power, belief, and identity collide in public. And long after the last comment was posted and the last video uploaded, that question stayed unresolved, waiting for the next time someone decided silence was no longer an option. Even after most people thought it was over, the aftermath kept unfolding in quieter, more unsettling ways. The kind of fallout that doesn't trend but lingers. Candace felt it in the way rooms went silent when she entered, in the pauses before people responded to her messages. Support still existed, but it was cautious now, filtered through fear of association. She understood it, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. "I didn't expect applause," she allegedly said to a friend. "I just didn't expect this emptiness." The story, in this universe, began to split into two versions. The public one, frozen in headlines and reaction clips, and the private one, where consequences lived. Candace questioned herself more than she ever admitted out loud. Not the truth of what she felt, but the cost of saying it. Every time a new creator dissected her words, she wondered whether she had accidentally given people permission to turn pain into content. Dave's world had shrunk dramatically. The noise was gone, but so were the people. No more constant invitations, no more casual check-ins. Days blended together, quiet and heavy. In one dramatized moment, he scrolled through old photos, laughing faces from years earlier, and whispered, "When did it all go wrong?" He couldn't pinpoint it, and that uncertainty gnawed at him more than any accusation. He tried reaching out to people he had once mentored, hoping for neutral ground. Some ignored him. Some responded politely but distantly. A few met him with honesty that stung. "You didn't listen back then," one allegedly told him. "Now you're hearing everything at once." That sentence stayed with him, echoing late at night when sleep refused to come. Ben's recalibration was more strategic. In this account, he studied the cycle closely, noting how outrage peaks and collapses. He didn't trust the calm. "It always comes back," he reportedly said. "It just changes shape." Still, the experience left a mark. He became sharper in private, more controlled in public. Every appearance felt calculated, every word weighed. Authenticity, once effortless, now felt like a risk. Fans, watching from the outside, began to fracture in more personal ways. Friendships ended over arguments in comment sections. Group chats dissolved after one too many heated debates. People realized they had invested not just time, but identity, into defending people who would never know them. That realization hurt more than any scandal. Emotions ran high, but they were inward now. Candace received a message that encapsulated it all. "I believed in you because I believed in them," it read. She stared at the screen for a long time. Belief, she realized, had been outsourced too easily. She responded simply, "I'm just a person." The reply came back, "That's the hardest part to accept." That exchange stayed private, but it defined her new understanding of the audience she spoke to. Dave faced a different reckoning. Stripped of constant affirmation, he was forced to confront motivations he had long ignored. In this telling, he admitted to himself that not every compromise had been necessary, not every silence strategic. Some had been fear, some had been convenience. Admitting that didn't absolve him, but it clarified things. Clarity, however painful, was something he hadn't felt in years. Ben's view controversy faded further into the background, but its residue remained. He noticed how easily narratives stick, how rarely they fully dissolve. "Even if it's wrong, it becomes part of you," he said quietly in one dramatized conversation. That awareness hardened his boundaries. Access became limited. Transparency became selective. Trust, once freely given, was now earned slowly. The audience's attention drifted, but the discourse evolved. Long-form discussions replaced hot takes. People talked about systems, incentives, and the cost of building influence in public. The story became less about individuals and more about structure. Some saw that shift as growth. Others saw it as deflection. The family was left divided not by anger anymore, but by interpretation. Candace leaned into that complexity. She stopped hinting, stopped teasing revelations. "I said what I needed to say," she reportedly told her team. "I'm not feeding this anymore." That decision cost her views, cost her relevance in certain spaces. But it gave her something she hadn't felt since the beginning: control. Dave, watching the conversation move on without him, felt both relief and grief. Relief that the spotlight had dimmed. Grief that it moved on without resolution. He wondered whether redemption required spectacle or simply time. No one could answer that for him. The internet doesn't offer closure, only distraction. Ben's strategy paid off in a different way. By stepping back, he became less interesting to critics and less accessible to supporters. The distance cooled everything. Not forgiveness, not condemnation. Just neutrality. In a landscape fueled by extremes, neutrality felt almost invisible. Months later, someone asked Candace if she would do it again. She paused before answering. Not for drama, but because the question deserved honesty. "I don't know," she said. That uncertainty was new. Once, she had been certain about everything. Now, she understood that certainty often hides consequences you can't see yet. Dave was asked a similar question in a private setting. Would he change anything? He didn't answer immediately. "I would have listened sooner," he eventually said. Not an apology, not a defense. Just an acknowledgement. Whether that mattered to anyone else was unclear. It mattered to him. Ben was never asked directly. People assumed his answer. Assumptions had become the default language of the entire saga. What remained after all the accusations, exaggerated rumors, and dramatized betrayals wasn't clarity, but caution. Creators became more guarded. Audiences became more skeptical. Trust, once given freely, now came with conditions. The system adjusted, not because it learned, but because it adapted. The final irony of this story was that everyone got what they said they wanted. Candace got her truth out. Dave got distance from a world that was consuming him. Ben got to prove he could survive controversy. And the audience got drama, lessons, and eventually, something newer to talk about. Yet beneath all of it, a quiet discomfort lingered. Because no matter how many angles were discussed, one question never fully went away. Was any of this necessary, or was it inevitable? In a world where attention is currency and silence is suspicion, perhaps the collapse was built in from the start. And as the last echoes of the story faded into archived videos and forgotten threads, one thing became clear to anyone still paying attention. The next time a figure speaks out, the audience will remember this. The next accusation will be measured against this. The next silence will be louder because of this. The drama may have ended, but the damage, the caution, and the lessons stayed. Waiting patiently for the next moment when someone decides the risk of speaking is finally worth more than the cost of staying quiet. Long after the noise died down, the silence became its own kind of pressure. Candace noticed it first in the way people spoke around her, carefully, like every sentence might be quoted somewhere else. Even compliments felt cautious now. "You were brave," someone would say, then pause, as if waiting for permission to continue. Bravery, she learned, makes people uncomfortable when it reminds them of their own silence. In this continuation, Candace spent more time alone than she ever had before. Not because she wanted to disappear, but because solitude was the only place where her thoughts weren't immediately judged. She replayed everything in her head, not the accusations themselves, but the moments leading up to them. The dinners, the private jokes, the meetings where everyone nodded along even when something felt off. "I should have trusted my instincts earlier," she allegedly admitted to herself. That realization hurt more than any backlash. Dave's days settled into a strange routine. Without the constant churn of attention, time stretched differently. Mornings were quiet, too quiet. He found himself missing the chaos even as he resented it. Controversy, he realized, had become a form of structure. Without it, he had to face parts of himself he had avoided for years. Who am I without the fight? He wondered, staring at a blank screen where ideas once flowed effortlessly. Friends who remained in his orbit described him as calmer, but heavier. Laughter came less often, but when it did, it sounded real. Still, there was an undercurrent of grief. Not just for reputation, but for the version of himself that believed loyalty was permanent. "I thought we were unbreakable," he supposedly said one evening. "Turns out we were just loud." Ben, watching from a calculated distance, absorbed everything quietly. In this dramatized telling, he treated the entire saga like a case study. Not publicly, but privately. How narratives form. How quickly perception overtakes facts. How outrage rewards simplicity and punishes nuance. This is the real economy, he allegedly said. Attention first, truth later. That understanding didn't make him cynical, but it did make him careful in a way he hadn't been before. Audiences, too, were changing. People who once consumed drama like entertainment began expressing fatigue. "I don't know who to believe anymore" became a common refrain. Some stepped back entirely. Others doubled down, clinging harder to their chosen version of events. The family was left divided not just by opinion, but by how much energy people were willing to invest in carrying it all. Candace sensed that shift and adjusted. She spoke less often, but with more intention. When she did speak, she avoided spectacle. No dramatic pauses, no loaded hints, just measured honesty. That approach didn't satisfy everyone. Some accused her of losing her edge. Others said she was finally showing maturity. She accepted both reactions without fighting them. Fighting, she had learned, only feeds the machine. Dave experimented with vulnerability in smaller spaces. Not public statements, not interviews, but real conversations. He listened more than he talked. Sometimes he heard things he didn't like. Sometimes he heard things that surprised him. One person told him, "You were never the monster people made you out to be. But you weren't listening when it mattered." That sentence stayed with him. Listening, he realized, might be the hardest form of accountability. Ben's world regained momentum, but on different terms. Growth continued, but scrutiny never fully disappeared. He accepted that as the price of visibility. "You don't get to choose what sticks," he allegedly said. "Only how you respond when it does." His responses became shorter, sharper, less emotional. Not colder, just more controlled. Months passed. The story became a reference point rather than a headline. People mentioned it the way they mention a storm they survived. "Remember when all that happened?" they'd say. The details blurred, but the feeling remained. Distrust, caution, awareness. Candace encountered a fan who surprised her. Instead of praise or anger, the fan simply said, "Watching all that made me rethink how much of myself I give to people online." Candace smiled sadly. "Me too," she replied. In that moment, the entire ordeal felt oddly worth it. Not because of vindication, but because of growth, however uncomfortable. Dave received an email he didn't expect. Not hate, not support, just reflection. The sender wrote about their own mistakes, their own silences. "Seeing you fall apart made me realize I'm not immune to becoming the villain in someone else's story." Dave read it twice. Maybe redemption wasn't about clearing his name. Maybe it was about becoming a warning. Ben overheard someone joking about buying views and didn't react. The joke didn't sting the way it once did. It had lost its power. Not because everyone believed him now, but because he had stopped needing everyone to. Indifference, he realized, was a form of freedom. The audience moved on, as audiences always do. New dramas replaced old ones. New villains, new heroes. But something subtle had shifted. Reactions were slower. Skepticism was higher. People asked more questions before choosing sides. Not everyone, not always, but more than before. Candace noticed it in comment sections. Fewer absolutes. More, "If this is true," and "We don't know everything." That didn't erase the damage, but it suggested learning. Learning is never loud, but it lasts longer. Dave noticed it too. Criticism became more nuanced. Praise more restrained. Extremes softened. He wondered if this was what accountability looked like when it wasn't performative. Uncomfortable, slow, incomplete. Ben watched from afar as the cycle repeated with other figures. The same patterns, the same outrage, the same eventual fatigue. "It never changes," someone said to him. He shook his head. "It does," he replied. "Just not the way people expect." In the end, no definitive truth emerged in this saga. No final confession. No universal agreement. Just fragments, perspectives, and consequences. Some people felt vindicated. Others felt betrayed. Most felt tired. Candace accepted that she would always be seen through this moment. Dave accepted that rebuilding would be quiet, if it happened at all. Ben accepted that suspicion comes with influence, whether earned or not. The family was left divided, but not destroyed. Division, after all, doesn't always mean collapse. Sometimes it just means distance. And distance, while painful, can also be clarifying. What lingered most wasn't anger, but awareness. Awareness that people are messier than narratives allow. Awareness that speaking out and staying silent both carry costs. Awareness that once a story escapes, it belongs to everyone and no one at the same time. And somewhere beneath the layers of accusations, exaggerated rumors, and dramatized betrayals, a quiet understanding settled in. This wasn't a story about scandal. It was a story about exposure. Not just of individuals, but of the system that rewards conflict and calls it truth. That understanding didn't trend, it didn't go viral, but it stayed, waiting for the next time someone feels the weight of silence and wonders whether breaking it will change anything at all. As time stretched on, the story took on a strange afterlife. It no longer lived in headlines or reaction videos, but in assumptions. Candace could feel it every time someone prefaced a question with, "I don't want to bring up the past," but the past was always present, hovering just behind every interaction. She learned to answer without flinching, to acknowledge without reopening wounds. Still, some nights, she lay awake wondering whether the truth she spoke had actually landed anywhere meaningful, or if it had simply become another piece of content swallowed by the machine. In this continuation, Candace began to redefine what speaking out meant to her. It was no longer about exposing anyone else. It was about refusing to lie to herself. She turned down opportunities that felt performative, declined invitations that promised attention but not substance. "I'm not here to relive it for clicks," she allegedly told one producer. Walking away cost her visibility, but it gave her something steadier. Peace, imperfect but real. Dave, existing in a quieter lane, faced a different challenge. Without constant validation or opposition, he had to confront the emptiness that followed ambition. He realized how much of his identity had been built in reaction to others. Allies, critics, audiences. All of them had shaped him more than he wanted to admit. "I don't know what I believe without an audience," he confessed in a rare moment of honesty. That admission scared him, but it also opened a door he hadn't known was there. He started small. Conversations without agendas. Opinions without performances. Sometimes he spoke and felt relief. Other times, regret. Growth, he learned, wasn't linear. It was awkward and often humiliating. But it was real. And real, unlike reputation, couldn't be taken away by strangers. Ben, observing from a calculated distance, leaned further into structure. Schedules tightened. Appearances became fewer but sharper. He treated credibility like a balance sheet, something to be maintained through consistency rather than persuasion. "You don't convince the internet," he allegedly said. "You outlast it." That philosophy didn't make him popular with everyone, but it made him stable. Audiences continued to evolve in subtle ways. Fewer people rushed to defend or condemn instantly. More people waited. Some learned the hard way that certainty feels good but rarely ages well. Comment sections reflected that shift. Debates still happened, but they were slower, more tentative. The family was left divided, but less violently so. Division turned into distance, and distance into detachment. Candace noticed a new kind of message arriving in her inbox. Not praise, not hate, but reflection. People sharing their own moments of silence, their own regrets about not speaking sooner or speaking too loudly. She responded when she could, briefly, honestly. "I don't have answers," she often wrote. "Just experiences." Those exchanges felt more meaningful than any viral moment ever had. Dave received fewer messages, but the ones he did receive cut deeper. Some thanked him for past inspiration, then explained why they felt let down. He didn't argue. He didn't defend. He read them, sat with them, and accepted that impact matters more than intent. That acceptance didn't erase pain, but it grounded it. Ben's controversies faded into background noise, referenced occasionally but no longer center stage. Still, he carried the awareness forward. Every spike, every dip, every accusation taught him something about perception. "You're never just successful," he reflected. "You're suspicious by default." Understanding that didn't soften him, but it sharpened his instincts. As months blurred into a year, the story became a lesson passed along quietly. Creators warned newcomers about alliances, about the cost of proximity to power. Fans warned each other about investing too deeply in strangers. The drama had become a cautionary tale, not because of its details, but because of its aftermath. Candace was asked once whether she felt vindicated. She thought about it carefully. "Vindication implies an ending," she said. "This didn't end. It changed." That answer frustrated some and resonated deeply with others. Change, she learned, is harder to celebrate than victory. Dave was asked whether he wanted forgiveness. He shook his head. "I want understanding," he replied. Forgiveness felt too clean for something this messy. Understanding required patience, and patience couldn't be demanded. Ben, ever pragmatic, was asked what he learned from it all. "That attention is borrowed," he answered. "And the interest rate is brutal." It was the closest he came to vulnerability, and it said more than any denial ever could. The audience, watching newer dramas unfold, carried this one like a scar. They recognized patterns faster now. The build-up, the whispers, the camps forming. Some disengaged early. Others leaned in, unable to resist the pull. Awareness doesn't always change behavior, but it changes how behavior feels afterward. Candace continued forward, less certain but more grounded. Dave rebuilt quietly, without spectacle. Ben moved strategically, eyes open. None of them returned to who they were before, because that version no longer existed. The final truth of this saga wasn't revealed in a leak or a statement. It emerged slowly, in hindsight. The realization that no one wins these stories. Not the accuser, not the accused, not the audience. There are only outcomes, and each carries a cost. And as the cycle prepared to repeat itself somewhere else, with different names and similar dynamics, one lingering thought remained for those who had watched closely. Maybe the real scandal wasn't what was said or done, but how easily everyone believed they were entitled to certainty in a world built on fragments. That thought didn't go viral. It didn't spark outrage, but it stayed, quiet, uncomfortable, and unresolved. Exactly like the story itself. Now it's your turn. After everything you've just heard, all the accusations, the silence, the fallout, and the questions that still don't have clear answers, what do you think really happened behind closed doors? Was Candace right to finally speak out no matter the cost, or did she open a door that should have stayed shut? Did Dave get unfairly turned into a villain by a story that grew bigger than the truth, or was this accountability arriving far too late? And what about Ben? Was the buying views controversy pure, or a symptom of how success itself breeds suspicion? This story isn't just about them, it's about how quickly narratives form and how hard they are to escape once they do. You've seen how emotions ran high, how fans were shocked, and how the family was left divided. But the biggest question is still unresolved, and that's where you come in. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't just say who you support, explain why. Did this change the way you see public figures online? Did it make you more cautious, or more skeptical, or did it confirm what you already believed? Your perspective matters more than hot takes and headlines. If you found this breakdown gripping, unsettling, or thought-provoking, make sure you hit like so more people can see it. Subscribe if you want more deep-dive drama stories like this one, where nothing is as simple as it looks and silence can be just as loud as accusations. And turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next, because stories like this never really end, they just wait for the next chapter. Now tell us in the comments, whose side are you on, or do you think the truth lives somewhere in between?